Hi, and welcome to the ManureTech Decision Support Tool for Swine. This tutorial will provide instructions about how to fill in the user input pages when using this DST. First, the purpose of this DST is to assist in optimizing manure management in primarily deep pit and shallow pit barns, from collection of manure to land application, either on farm or for export off farm when there's excess manure streams. There are a few assumptions to point out. First, this DST models manure management only. It's not a whole farm planning DST, and it models manure management from primarily shallow pit barns, but does include two deep pit scenarios. This tool compares a user input baseline scenario with either the top ranked alternatives or certain scenarios of choice by the user. And throughout this DST and the user guide, terminology is used that might be different from terminology used in different parts of the US. So the user should review the glossary of terms to understand what's meant by different technologies or terms. Specific animal breeds are not included in the DST, although the user can certainly adjust operative factors such as animal weight and manure characteristics to align with their on-farm breeds. Similarly, specific crop or crop cycles are not included in the DST, although the user can assess their average crop nutrient fertilizer needs and adjust the values in the DST to align with their on-farm circumstances. So we can start by going to the farm info page by clicking the button at the top or bottom of the pages. And the inputs that we'll go through today for this tutorial follow the inputs used in the user guide for the wean to finish example farm. So starting with this farm management information page, enter the farm name. We will enter wean to finish test farm. So we're going to consider wean to finish animals in this. We'll select our baseline manure management system. This can be either what you currently have that you want to compare alternatives to, or if you don't currently have a system, this would just be the baseline system that you want to compare other alternatives to. We're going to stick with the default, this one at the top, for deep pit with tanker land application. The full description of the system that you have chosen will be shown in this box here. So here you can enter where your farm is located. For this example, we will use Northwest Iowa. We'll use the default yes to the farm using sprinklers and all the default values here. I won't spend a lot of time on things that we're using the default for, but you can refer to the user guide to learn more about how these are used. So how much land is available for spreading manure? This is your on-farm land, not to include any neighbors that you expect to send or export excess manure stream. So this is just your on-farm, and we're going to say 750 acres. We'll apply for nitrogen through injection. We'll use these default values for your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium needs. This would be just on average on all the acres on your farm each year. And then how many days you have to land apply in a given sort of typical year. We'll say 60 days. And then we'll say we'll keep the default of $0 per credit for carbon reduction credits. So we can scroll down to the bottom and go to the next page for animals. By default, all the animals on the farm will be selected as no. We'll scroll down to the wean to finish and select yes, because we have wean to finish animals. And then we can input how many we have and what their average weight is. So for this example, we'll say we have 4,800 animals at 150 pounds each. And then we don't have any other animals on this example farm, so we can skip these. The selection is still no. Go down to the bottom and click the next tab for manure characteristics. We'll keep all the defaults here. The first few questions talk about how deep someone might be able to dig to build a storage facility like a pond or a lagoon. And then the next several questions talk about anytime flush water recycling is used, or fresh water for these scrape systems and other systems. If fresh water is used, you can input your values here. Whether you currently use a flush or a scrape or pool plug or deep pit, you can enter that specific information. However, the tool will run all of the scenarios with all of these systems. So don't put 0 on anything. A value will be needed for the tool to run properly. The next section asks about specific manure characteristics for each type of animal. We will keep all the defaults here, so we can scroll to the bottom and move on to the next page. This page asks about what happens when you don't have enough land to apply all the manure that's generated on your farm and you have to export some. So in this swine DST, some of the manure streams include liquid, slurry, sludge, separated solids, and compost. So if you had to export, you could either pay somebody to haul that off, you could give it away, or you could sell it. And so the defaults for each type of manure stream are listed here. We assume by default that liquid, slurry, and sludge is given away, but that separated solids and compost may be sold. If your particular circumstances differ, then you can enter your percentages in this table. The next table asks about, well, if you have to pay to export any of those manure streams, how much do you pay? We're going to stay with the defaults here. And then if you receive revenues from any excess stream, you can enter in how much you receive in this table. Next, we'll go to tractor properties. So when you are land applying on your farm, this is asking what's your average distance for land application. So we're going to say we can land apply on average 1 mile from the storage, but the maximum distance that we would be traveling to land apply on our farm, we're going to say is 2 miles. We'll stick with 6,000 gallons for the tanker size to land apply. We'll also stay with the defaults for things like how many hours of use we can expect for each tractor and how many hours of use per day for those tractors. There's a tab where you can adjust capital costs, and we'll stick with the defaults here. You can learn more about this process and how you can adjust capital costs in the tool by referring to the user manual. Same for the operational costs. You can adjust these. These are the defaults are based on the state and region that you input on that first page, and you can adjust any of these in this table. So now we'll go to priorities, and we're going to select that we are interested in the non-sludge year. So for those scenarios that have a lagoon that accumulates a sludge layer, that would be land applied or exported by default every 10 years. In this case, we're saying we're not concerned with that sludge year. We are just concerned with this sort of typical non-sludge year and what we're going to do with our manure that's generated. We're also interested in just the on-farm environmental impacts. We can scroll down and adjust our rating or the relative weight put to each of our metrics. And for this example, we'll stay with the default settings where most of our priority and importance is in cost, capital, operating, and net benefits, but we do place some value on these other economic factors as well as our environmental and functional and logistical priorities. So when we go to scenario choices, we're going to say that we really want to compare our baseline scenario with the top ranked alternatives. You can adjust these using this drop down arrow and selecting any particular scenario that you want to compare. And you can learn more about that in the user manual. Finally, we'll go to the input summary, and this is where all of those inputs that you just put in on each page can be seen here, as well as if the default is used or not. So you can review this to quickly see what your inputs are. If you want to print this page, you can do so, and page print setup has been put in place for easy printing. That concludes the tutorial on going through the user input pages for the ManureTech Swine DST, and you can refer to subsequent videos to learn about how to view the results pages.